This space is intended to bring awareness to the hurdles of third-party reproduction and help navigate the anxiety and societal stigmas that come with it. The road to parenthood looks different for everyone. For those of us who can't have traditional families, the aim is to strengthen the resolve against society's expectations. We're known as the worst club with the best members, and I'm blessed to have found my tribe. You're listening to Mothers in Arms. I'm your host, Leslie Lopez. This is episode number 21. Protect yourself before you wreck yourself. In this last year, and in the last 2 months particularly, escrow fraud and third-party reproduction has been in the media. This tragedy of how this heinous act is affecting the victims of these fraudulent companies really affects all of us in this community. My heart goes out to them. To you, if you're listening to this, I do know what it is like to lose all the capital that you've been working so hard for. And in these cases, those funds were meant to be for the families that these intended parents were depending on to have their babies. There are red flags that we can be on alert for so we don't let jerks like this hurt us again. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to learn about safety protocols that have been established in this industry by the nonprofit SEEDS, the Society for Ethics in Egg Donors and Surrogacy, of which Adam Winder, joining us today, is the key professional advocating for the welfare of the victims involved and in protective escrow services. Adam is the president and CEO of Seed Trust, which is arguably the top leading escrow service company in our industry. They've been bringing peace of mind and heart to their clients for over 10 years. They're a team providing secure, transparent, and worry-free services filled with passion and professional expertise. Without further ado, let's get into this. Thank you, Adam, for being on the show. It means so much that you took the time to be with us today.
Thanks for having me.
You are the president and CEO of Seed Trust. It's an escrow company for anyone going through a third-party reproductive journey. Seed Trust is recognized as a leader in surrogacy and egg donation in this industry, and you have incredible top-notch reviews across all the search engines. Congratulations.
Thank you. We work hard at it.
It shows. Your background are MBAs in business and economics, and you were in the banking and financial industry for over 15 years. You led strategy in commercial business at SunTrust Bank. And it seems that all of this was part of this foundation for you, this core value that has transferred over to Seed Trust. How you feel that it's important to reduce unnecessary financial burden in any type of escrow process. Is that right?
No, it's spot on. I think what a lot of people don't realize is what we do in surrogacy and egg donation escrow. It's quite involved and it's a bit complex. And I think the company managing the funds between the parties is operating very much like a trust company in a bank. They're serving as a fiduciary between parties. It's a 2-year process, a lot of payments. It's quite complex. So where I'm passionate about and what we saw is that the entities managing the money should be secure and set up to do it properly so that it truly adds value.
Yes. And value across the line, right? Value not just financially, but like emotionally, psychologically, right? As someone who went through a surrogacy journey and needed to have an escrow account through my agency, you want to feel and know that you have transparency and security.
Well, for sure. We've unfortunately seen, I always think back to when we first started in this field 10 years ago. And, when Seed Trust just turned 10 this year as a company. And what we saw back then was escrow really, what it was like kind of operating more like a title company. It held the funds and then the agency had full control and they would just put the check in the mail. And so they didn't actually check receipts. There was no technology. There was no scheduled payments. There was no bonding. There was no security. And what all that did was it just created more financial stress, but it also created more financial risk. So this entity that was supposed to be making the process financially less stressful and less uh, painful for the process and more secure was actually creating a bigger problem and more risk. And that's what we set out to change. And over the 10 years, it has changed for the better, right? Like escrow now truly does take on more responsibility to act as a fiduciary between the parties. There's technology, and we've pushed the envelope around security to make sure the funds are secure. But we're on the eve of or on the brink of another escrow catastrophe. So it just breaks my heart when we still see today, after there has truly been a standard and a better model created, that some people end up at less secure options. So I think what you're doing here, educating people, is so important.
Gosh, I hear the word catastrophe and my body starts to shake and shiver because I think of people who have trusted. You know, you do your research, you trust an escrow company, and then suddenly it's like the California wildfire, right? Like everything you thought was there is gone, and it's so scary.
Yeah, parents and surrogates and donors, they trust people, and that are making recommendations, and they do their research. But gosh, I mean, you know it, right? When you think about this journey as an intended parent or even as a surrogate, there's so much information. There's so many people offering you services and selling you, and you have to cut through a lot to make decisions. And there's so many big decisions to make, right? My doctor, my attorney, my agency, and sometimes the ancillary services get put as an afterthought,
Right.
um, because there's so much decision fatigue, and it's so complex. And but I think it's really important that people. It's proven to be really important that people become thoughtful with all the providers and do research to make sure they're qualified. I always say escrow is one of the cheapest services that you will hire as a parent and for the journey. But if you get it wrong, it'll be the most expensive.
Wow. Finances in an industry that is so personal, right? You said you're trusting someone. You want, in a way, you want out of sight, out of mind, because you want to focus on your family, this biological side of your building it, and you don't want to worry so much about the nitty gritty. But in reality, I mean, how much do intended parents need to know about all of these, the ledgers, the fund disbursements? Like, how much do you really need to know?
Look, I think it's really important that parents understand the cost of their journey and the various components. I think of surrogacy having both fixed and variable cost. Your fixed, and all this is spelled out in the contract. But parents and surrogates go through a lot of time and energy negotiating their contract. This is going to lay out all the terms and most of the important components of the journey. Now, look, do they all catch everything? No, and that's where separate approvals come. But I think for an intended parent and a surrogate, truly understanding the contract and what they agreed on is absolutely important for a few reasons. One, parents need to know what to expect cost wise. Nothing's worse than being surprised. And in the contract, like, a lot of things are fixed: base pay, monthly allowances, things that are already kind of agreed upon. These should be, like you said, things that this is done, this should be managed on my behalf. I shouldn't have to worry about it. Then there's the items that are variable, the medical bills, things that can come up like lost wages and bed rest and travel that vary a bit. And I think it's important for parents to have an understanding of this so it doesn't create unnecessary financial concern and tension in the journey. I think what a family is going through and sacrificing to build their family is incredible. It's also very expensive and very stressful and very emotional. So the more you can kind of understand what you're going to proceed through and what things could come up, so it's not a surprise or shock that can create unnecessary stress, is really important. I also think it's important because I think surrogates are like superheroes. Like what they do, like what they do to help a family, help build a family, is so amazing. I always liken it to like I can't even wrap my head around it. I haven't worked with so many of these superhero women. Like what they're doing is so incredible. They also and it's like the closest thing I can think of is like donating an organ or like
That's right.
doing a
That's
relation-
exactly how I see it also. Like exactly, an organ donor.
yeah, and maybe even more meaningful. Like I don't know, but like just something so incredible that can never be taken away from them. That does also come with some personal risk
Yes.
and cost. So the surrogates need to be protected, but they also need to fully understand. And what you don't want is confusion around like some of these variable costs, like lost wages or bed rest, to create this beautiful thing that this surrogate's doing for a family and create unnecessary tension and stress and
Right.
relationship fatigue to where now the relationship isn't about this miracle that this surrogate's doing to help this very deserving and amazing build this amazing family. It becomes about, well, what's the calculation of your salary and why did you stay at this level of hotel, or things like this can create stress and just kind of deteriorate a relationship. So I think a few things there. I think fully understanding the cost and what to expect and the timeline, absolutely critical. I
Right.
also think parents and surrogates hire professionals to do work for them, and these professionals are paid to do this work, like the agencies and the attorneys and the escrow companies make them do the work and entrust them to do it well. So understand it, but make sure that if you have, like, for example, if you're working with an agency, the agency can serve as a good mediator between the relationship between a parent and a surrogate. So you don't have to have the uncomfortable conversations if you want to verify, like, hey, was that expense correct? Or is this normal and customary? Have the conversation with the professionals first, even with the escrow company. We stop a lot of unnecessary stressful conversations by just having managed a lot of cases and having experience, that people contact us and say, hey, is this in the contract? Is this normal? And we can quickly say, yes, we've done this 30,000 times. This is what to expect. Here's the process. And it just helps. So you can just let the relationship not be riddled with surprises and unnecessary tension.
It really does deteriorate the relationship, as you said, if these sort of curveballs come up at during this journey, right? It can add stress. It can add separation between the intended parents and the surrogate, especially if it's an independent journey and you really don't have that third party there to help manage it. You're so right.
Yeah, and with independence, I know sometimes the thought there is to save money. Escrow is not the place to do it. We keep our costs very low on it for independence for escrow because our work is a lot more. But even if it's a friend, even if it's your best friend or your sister or a close relative or somebody you've known forever, have escrow, have a contract, because when you get into the thick of it, everybody needs to be protected and you need clarity. And hopefully you never even have to look at it or it never becomes an issue, but at least it's clear and it doesn't create a problem. We see a lot of issues in kind of close relationships on the independent side where they didn't do a great job with their contracts. You get into it, it gets tense. So
That's so true. Independent journeys, you can't even imagine all the repercussions that are going to come from this, right? Like, yeah, your friend, your loved one is doing the best intentions to come and help you with this, but if you don't have all these things dialed into your contract before you go in, like, you may end up losing that loved one. Like, it's definitely going to affect that relationship. You have quite the impressive team at Sea Trust. They have decades of combined experience in law, assisted reproduction, and finance. They're dedicated to simplifying this for everyone, like from surrogate to all the way through to the intended parent's partner, right? Um, I noticed on your website, you can talk to anyone in French, Mandarin, Spanish, English. It's quite international, right? But you're based in West Palm Beach.
our clients are national and international, right? So we have clients from all over the world and all across the country. So it's important for us that, to your point, speaking the different languages we can, because sometimes speaking to somebody in your dialect is comforting. but also our employees are spread across the country. Look, it's good that we have employees in different time zone that speaks different languages so we can serve people across the country.
I also feel like these employees that work in third party reproduction are also sort of unique beings, right? They are not necessarily working at any other type of financial company, right? It's someone who's seeing I'm helping someone grow a family outside of the norm, right? Like it can be, some people's families religiously, culturally, they might not be able to stand behind something like that, right? Out in the world, you could get grief for working in this sector. So I also feel like your employees can be angels of sorts.
No, I'm always humbled by just working alongside the amazing people in this field. I mean, when you kind of look holistically, put our company or companies aside, it's just an incredible group of people. Like I've worked in the space for a long time. I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of different professionals as a service provider that works across the board with different agencies and different escrow, different insurance companies and different providers. And it's just so amazing to watch how these people care, right? Like I think it's such a passionate group of people. Many of us work 24/7 around the clock because we're not, like to your point, we're not working at a bank, or we're working at something that's so important and so amazing. Like I always say and you see it in the field. Like I would always say, like, look to surrogacy in this country during COVID. There was babies across the country that couldn't get home. And the amazing people in this field literally took care of these kids and fought and fought and fought and found ways to get them home. And it wasn't in their contract. It wasn't expected of them. It was just the right thing to do,
Oh my
right?
gosh.
You and you see what happened in other countries. It wasn't the same. And I even think about, like, right now, we have, or last year, we've had escrow frauds, for example. When these things happen or there's a bad actor, people jump to help these families. These families are victims of a bad actor. People always ask me, C-Trust has donated millions of dollars in services to help people who are victims of these bad actors and taking on
Wow.
their escrow work pro bono and things like that. And yes, is it hard for our company? Yes. Did our employees suffer because we weren't necessarily staffed and ready for that? Yes. But it was the right thing to do, and we feel like it was our purpose. So when I go to my team and I say, look, we're going to take on these cases and we're going to help these people, and it's going to be hard. There's never even like a question of, are we doing this? Because it's the right thing to do. And I think you see that across the board with a lot of professionals, with a lot of agencies, with a lot of service providers. And it's really just amazing. Now, I also remind everybody constantly, our ability to serve and help build families in this space, it's like one of the most amazing purposes somebody could have professionally, but
So
it's
true.
also a privilege. And if we don't do it correctly, and that the industry and the field doesn't keep improving and setting rules and regulations and doing a better job, then it's a privilege that could be lost. And think about all the families that wouldn't be able to have it be built if so the risk is high. So when these instances of bad actors come up, it makes me cringe, not only for the individual families, which is heartbreaking, but
Right.
for the risk of the field that helps so many as a whole.
It
It's
really does affect everybody. You're right. When it's one victim, it affects everybody. And it's a reflection on our entire industry. And I know you can't really get into the specifics of what happened, but can you share a little bit about what what happened?
Yeah, there's a case breaking right now, and the details are emerging. But in my opinion, it's one of the it's the remaining. It was the remaining example of a provider that was operating in a model that shouldn't exist. And I want to be really sympathetic. It was not the parents' fault for ending up with that provider. It was not the surrogate's fault. They didn't know, right? They were trusting what they had learned, and made the best decision they could with the information provided. But what happened was a number of families ended up with an agency that held escrow, and the agency that held escrow had zero qualifications and zero safeguards in place to hold escrow. And when you
Mm.
really look at state laws in the mature states that do a lot of surrogacy, or the newer statutes, it's banned. And it's banned for good reason. One, in this case, even if it was a prohibited practice, they weren't qualified to do it. They didn't have bonding, they didn't have checks and balances, they didn't have any transparency or oversight. And without
Wow.
that, any provider, the risk is too high. The
Mm.
case of agency held escrow, in my opinion, with very few examples of extreme security and transparency, the risk is just too high because the agencies, A, it's not their core competency. They're not good at managing money. It's not what they do. But more importantly, they're the parties bringing everybody together.
Hmm.
They're the parties matching. They're the parties bringing in all the professionals typically. And they're also, if they're holding the money and they're paying themselves and nobody's watching them, the risk of temptation is just too high. So my advice to everybody is if you're meeting with an agency and you really love that agency and you want to work with them and they hold escrow, you can still work with that agency, but I would insist to use outside escrow. Or I'd pick a different agency if they don't allow that. With this particular
Right.
case, we had a lot of their cases where their clients chose and demanded that they worked with outside escrow. Those clients aren't sitting there with all their money gone. The ones that didn't push to have outside escrow that had their money within that agency, unfortunately, aren't going to get likely or not going to get a positive outcome.
You think it's easier because it's being handled in house. And so it's one less thing you have to worry about. It's the same party. But actually, you're right. You should really try to never use an escrow within the agency. Is that right?
I I couldn't agree more holistically. And look, this isn't a pitch to use C Trust. I'm biased. And I think C Trust is the best, and we are an outlier in terms of security and team experience. But what I'm an advocate for is just use a qualified provider, right? That's going to add the value that you would expect them to, and keep your money safe.
There's the case in Washington, D.C. I'm not sure if it's the same case, where two of the intended parents, they lost over $170,000 in their escrow account, because in their case, the escrow company was not licensed in Washington state. How could have the intended parents done the research to find out if they were licensed there? How do you check that out?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked. What we do is so niche. I think the best place, despite what state you're in, for a parent to look now is go to seedsethics.org and look at the standards. So if you go for professional, go to standards and look at the escrow standard. That escrow standard clearly outlines the pillars that should be in place for an escrow company to be qualified to manage your money. And they really just follow industry best practices around what it looks like to qualifications to manage money. So that didn't exist until this year. And now that's not just a company or a group of people, that's a leading organization in our space saying you can look here. And in my opinion, that's a minimum standard. My company, we look to set the gold standard and continue to set a high bar to raise that. But to me, that seeds escrow standard is a minimum standard. And if they don't meet it, they're not qualified to manage your money.
So you're saying that seed sets the insurance amount. So that insurance amount is in case of an unforsaken, the client is covered because of this insurance amount and this bond.
I'm glad you asked. There's so much misinformation about insurance and financial protection. So if I could just take a bigger, like a more holistic look at this, right? When you think about a company manager managing your money, right? They need to be qualified, meaning they need a professional staff. Okay. And I think that looks like in what we do, it's legal. It's legal because we're looking at contracts and approving it. You need accounting expertise because we're managing money and payments and ledgers. And then you need a lot of, so that's absolutely critical. Now, the seed standard says you need legal and financial and accounting expertise. I think a gold standard is you want attorneys and accountants involved, right?
Right.
Professionals making sure that and then somebody qualified to run a financial company because they're managing hundreds and hundreds of payments daily, millions of dollars in a very complex process, and they're making decisions based on contracts. It's involved, right? So you need to look to the staff to say, do they have the legal, accounting, and qualifications to run a financial company? If you don't feel like they're qualified to do that, I wouldn't pick them. One of the cases last year where there was escrow fraud, that team had zero financial or legal expertise on their team, and people were entrusting them to manage their money. So that's one thing. You also want to make sure an escrow company has the right systems and processes and procedures in place. This is super boring stuff, but bear with me for a minute. You wouldn't want anybody to manage your money that didn't have like the age-old saying of like checks and balances, right? So, for example, you would want an escrow company to have thoughtful checks and balances to where somebody separate submitting, somebody different is approving, somebody different is doing the payment, and somebody separate's paying that out, and then somebody else is auditing and checking it. So what that makes sure is not one person can steal the money. It actually takes a group of people colluding. It also limits errors. And a financial company also needs to have very robust systems to make sure nobody can bypass those checks, that process to cheat it. So they
Right.
need systems and sophistication to make sure people have to follow it. So if you have a qualified team and you have the right checks and balances, like, and for example, at C Trust, it takes 5 people to approve a single payment. Even the owner, myself, would have to collude with 3 to 4 people to take money.
Wow.
So you need this kind of rigor because look, we all try to be careful, but people go bad. Sometimes people get addicted to things and can make bad decisions. And you just want to
Right.
avoid, you want the structure in place to where temptation doesn't get the best of people or bad actors can't take advantage of it. So if you have the right qualified staff and you have the right structure, there's more, but the last big thing is just you need transparency. You have all this in place. Everybody needs to be able to watch, right? So this is where you get into the parents can see, the surrogates can see, the agencies can see, everybody can kind of make sure on a real time basis what's available. And you need oversight. So what does oversight look like? So I can sit as an escrow company, I can sit here and say, look, we have our 5-step approval process. It takes 4 people internally and somebody externally to submit. And my gosh, we certainly have a large team of over 100 people and attorneys and CPAs. And gosh, I used to run strategy I was in banking for a long time. You can trust us. That's great. And all of that's true, by the way. But you also need oversight. So in our industry, what oversight looks like is I think any financial company should be audited. This is a third party CPA that does a full financial audit. And I think the audit should have a cover letter that speaks to the clients of the escrow company that says the money is there as shown and is being ethically managed. For example, Seed Trust gives that letter out to our clients every year. It's in our portal. We do a full audit by a top 25 CPA firm. We release the findings around the escrow money. This tells everybody that's working with Seed Trust everything they're saying is true. That's one thing. And you asked about insurance. This is the final tier for me. And insurance has two components. One, there's so much misinformation about insurance. What matters for an escrow company? General liability, that's cute. We don't have offices. Nobody's going to come in and slip and fall. Right? But what matters in an escrow company and what experience has shown is there's really 3 tiers of insurance that matter. The
Okay.
one that you mentioned, which is the most important, is the bond. Also a crime policy. It's one place in insurance where insurance and bonding overlap because a fidelity bond and a criminal insurance policy is effectively the same thing. Now, what this is, and this is the facility you asked about the amount, is a bond or a crime policy is what protects parents and surrogates from somebody stealing the money.
Okay.
An employee of the company or the owner stealing the money. That number, that really matters because typically when there's an issue, it's a thief, right? So it's a criminal. And by the way, criminals and over the past 20 years, criminals who have mismanaged funds in escrow have been sentenced to 19 years and 7 months in jail
Wow.
for mismanaging escrow money or stealing. Those families were impacted negatively. Fortunately, those criminals go to jail. So, but that bond really matters, because what happens is if somebody does steal, that's what repays the parents. And the cases where we had a case where a CFO of a company or a controller or whatever she was stole money. And fortunately, that company had a bond, and that bond helped repay the parents. Now, the bond wasn't quite high enough, but it did help, and the company was able to get the rest. So that bond really matters. C Trust has 100 million. What I would argue, which to my knowledge is the largest financial bond of any escrow company in our country. We've taken it to like the absolute extreme,
Wow.
but because I think it's the right thing to do and it helps me sleep at night. But what's really important with the bond, and you asked about the amount, the seed standard says the minimum is 10 million. So, and why 10 million matters? To get a $10 million bond, an escrow company has to go through underwriting. So, an insurance company whose expertise is underwriting risk, like insurance companies, what they do is they say, we're going to give you insurance. We hope you never use it. And we're going to collect your money. Right.
Right.
But their expertise is making sure they're not taking an outsized risk for their shareholders. So that insurance company is going to underwrite the escrow company to say, is this worth a $10 million risk? And do I think they're all the things that are they qualified? Do they have procedures? Is there an easy ability to steal money? And if they don't think it's worth a $10 million risk for their shareholders, they're not going to write the policy. So the reason I'm a big advocate of making sure there's a minimum of 10 million in place is because an insurance company who's an expert at underwriting risk is taking a $10 million bet that that company is secure.
Right.
And if they
Right.
get it wrong, then they're going to lose 10 million bucks. And at least that much is there to protect the families. So that's why the $10 million bond matters. The other areas of insurance that really matter, there again, second, third would be errors and omissions if they make a mistake, and cyber if there's a cyber attack.
Right. So speaking of cyber attack, is it mandatory, or is this do escrow companies operate on a private web browser? Like, is there certain
Yeah, look, web security is critical for an escrow company, much like a bank, right? You know, um, escrow companies should operate with very similar encryption levels, and I'll save boring you and the listeners like the types of encryption, but they should operate with extreme encryption, two-factor authentication, and insecure systems. Not only are we managing people's money, we're also managing their secure information and their personal information. So it's really important that they have really strong cyber protections. And look, any company holding money is constantly under attack. So C-Trust has built our own custom software, which uses bank level encryption and all the highest levels of security, data and financial security we can implement, much like a bank. And I can, knock on wood, we've never had an attack, a successful attack, but I will tell you every day the people are trying.
I want to ask Adam, because I honestly don't remember this, but what is the cost for someone to use an escrow company? What percentage?
Yeah, so escrow, I think today, when I started we started 10 years ago. The price was $1,500 for an escrow. Now
Right.
I think we charge now 2,000 for escrow. So, but in general, I think the price for escrow is somewhere between 1,500 and 22,500, in that
Okay.
range. C Trust charges 2,000. What I'll say around price is, it's like I said, it's such a small price comparative to the overall journey. But these escrow companies are holding your money, and they're managing your money per your contract. It's their job to check every receipt, to check every
100%.
calculation, and to make sure that that money's managed purely according to your contract. So, and I've helped thousands unfortunately, or over 1,000 victims who'd chosen to save $200 or $300 on escrow
For
and
what?
lost
Yeah.
everything, right?
Yeah.
And not only do you want to make sure not only do you want to make sure the money's secure, you also want to make sure that they're qualified to make sure it's managed correctly. We save thousands and weekly in at request of escrow that we deny. We save millions a year of things that we have to change and adjust to make sure that they're paid per that contract. So if you're a parent or a surrogate and you're going to spend all this time negotiating a contract and putting it in place, you want to make sure the company qualified to make sure it's money's paid per that contract is qualified.
100%. I remember those first meetings. It felt overwhelming with all the information coming at you, but boy, did I benefit from all of that up front, going through, dotting the T's, crossing the T's, dotting the I's, getting all of that dialed in so that when as we were going, things came up. If I was out of town, if I was out of the country and suddenly she needed to go to the doctor. Suddenly the doctor said, "Oh, you need this medicine." And if she couldn't get a hold of me within 24 hours, she didn't need my permission, right? Like that's what the escrow account is there for, to facilitate the funds, right? Yes, communicate with us, but she can't just go in there and take it, you know?
Right. Yeah, look, you want to, yeah, I mean, look, the parents are paying the escrow company to make sure it's per their contract, and they shouldn't have to worry about the base comp should be paid or if it's going to be paid on time. They've hired a professional to do it. They need to be very aware of that that's scheduled and it's going out and it's on time and they're not in breach of their contract. But these things, there are bigger things to focus on: the future family, and all of that, to worry about the small things. If you hire the right professionals, that's possible.
I was reading on your website that when you became a father, it inspired you to create this company of sorts. Was that part of the momentum for you with Seed Trust?
Yeah, I was around Seed Trust ahead of that. My business partner, Edward Brockschmidt, we call him Brock. He was the founder, and I got the company. I really, it really made sense to me. I believed in it. But when I was holding my little girl for the first time, my daughter, that's when it clicked. That's when I really like it went from like understanding something in theory to like this is a need. People deserve to have a family, and people that are going through this. I've always been extremely passionate about when I see people being taken advantage of or something that could be done better. It's always been a core driver for me to fix it. Um, but when I was holding my daughter for the first time, that's when I like really got it. It was emotional of like holy moly, everybody should have the opportunity to have this amazing feeling. And that, how it is once you have your kids, that just reminds you every day of how important what we do is. Um, so yes, I always got why C Trust mattered. I got involved early. I left my job, which was I was on a very good career track at a bank to be as a leader and head of strategy. Or
But this got under your heartstrings. It started pulling at you.
yeah, this wasn't a financial decision; it was an emotional one. But it's when you get to see the impact that we get to have and how we get to help people, like that matters so much more than any paycheck or any dollar amount. And yes, it hit home hard when I realized how amazing it is to be to have your own family. And when I look at what we do, so many people have their family easily, right? Some people accidentally.
Right,
And
right.
parents that pursue building their family through surrogacy, they go through so much and they're willing to fight and invest and figure out this process. And you talk about people deserving to have their family. I can't think of more meaning people that deserve so more. And I'm like I said, it's just a privilege of me to be able to help make it just a little bit more secure and better.
Is this a motivation of you being involved with Seeds? You were the president of Seeds. You're on the executive board. You're an executive board member there. And yeah, you are the one making the guidelines for other escrow companies in the nation, in our world. It's so important what you're doing. And we're so grateful that you are taking this upon yourself and the team to gather the troops and rally, not just for Seed Trust, for every escrow company that's out there, for every intended parent wanting to stream. It's crucial work in a sector that it's not that old, right? How long has third-party reproduction been around? So what's happening today is going to be around for a long time.
For sure. Yeah, no, look, I'm very passionate about giving back, right? Like that's, you know, something I'm passionate about in general. But when you look at our field in particular, look, this has really been around for 40 years, right? I mean, and I can only speak to what we've seen at Seed Trust over the last 10, but gosh, it's emerging quickly. And it went from a very cottage industry to one that's becoming more well known and more mainstream and more known. And as it grows, you need more regulations, you need more rules, you need standards, because otherwise more people are going to get hurt and there's going to be bad actors. Like I always say every industry has bad actors when they exist in ours, which are, I would argue, are fewer and far between than other industries, but it hits harder because what we do is so personal. But yes, why I'm passionate about seeds is, well, we can keep at Seed Trust. What we're doing isn't rocket science. I mean, we saw a need of something that wasn't being done well or securely, and we set out at all costs to fix it and make it better. And then every day we get up and we keep raising that bar to say, what can we do better? How can we make this experience better? And that's led us to be the first in technology, the first with the online portal, the first to do scheduled payments, the first to take the liability, the first with the big bond. But that only solves and makes people who choose Seed Trust more secure, right? And what I view at Seeds is it's literally the leading organization that's not just legal or just medical. It's the organization that looks at the whole industry and says, how can we set standards and ethical practices that truly protects everybody? And that's why I'm passionate about it. So I came into the field. I started off on a committee, went from a committee to an officer as president, to the board, now the chair of the board. And I keep saying, like, I've done my time, right? Like let's get other people involved. And we've grown the team significantly, but there's so much more we can do. And that Seeds has this opportunity to make the field safer for everybody. And when I say, like, when you asked me earlier, like, how does a parent determine which agency to select? Gosh, that's hard. Well, at least there's a set of agency standards at Seeds that they can look to say, are they meeting these practices? Escrow now. Make sure these things are in place, right? And Seeds is going to continue doing that. So I think that's why I'm passionate about Seeds. I'm passionate about giving back to this industry. I'm passionate about what we do. But if I always look at people who say it could do more or the industry should do more. Well, then what I always say to them is get involved, help us. Like, we have to keep volunteering. We have to keep pushing it. We have to keep making it better for people because what we do is amazing and people need our help.
They really do. It takes a village.
It really does.
Thank you, Adam, so much for all of your guidance, your knowledge, your time today on simplifying this, what can be to people like me, this scary world of finances, but so crucial to have dialed in when you're dealing with this. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's been a real pleasure.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you, Adam, again so much for all of your knowledge. You can check out more of these and similar stories on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, and TikTok at mothersinarms.pod. can you take 5 seconds, please, to rate this episode and like the channel on whatever platform you're listening to? Thank you. It really goes a long way to getting the word out on this little podcast. If you have any comments or messages, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your music at Dante Pascuzzo, and thank you at Pretty Easy Podcast for all the magic. Until next time, friends, happy holidays.